What are the realistic trade packages the Titans could expect to receive if they decided to move the number one pick? I want to do this podcast, Justin, because a lot of Titans fans out there are expecting that if they trade back from number one, they can get a future first-round pick. I don't believe that is true. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Oh, welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Broadway Sports Media in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo, our first podcast officially of the 2025 offseason with the Super Bowl concluding on Sunday night. Justin, how's it going?
Doing well. Can't complain. Excited to be here with you. Like you said, first one officially of the offseason. Although if you ask me, Titans have been in the offseason since about week 5, I think it was. So it's been a good minute for them. But officially now, we are in the offseason.
That's right. We are in the offseason, which means, the draft discourse has already been, at a very high level, but it's going to ramp up even more here. And especially things that we haven't talked a lot about are free agency. You and I are going to do an episode later this week on free agent quarterback options for the Titans. Again, if they decide not to pick one in this draft, or if they do, could still sign a quarterback and draft one. We'll get into that later this week. But today I want to talk about what the Titans might actually be looking to receive if they decided to trade back from the number one pick. And if you follow the news closely, if you follow the Titans or just the NFL in general, you would have seen on February 9th, which I believe was Sunday morning, Ian Rapoport published a story on NFL.com with the headline, Titans open to potentially trading number one pick in 2025 NFL draft, expected to receive calls. So I want to get into this discussion because firstly, Titans open to potentially trading has been spun across social media as Titans want to move out of the pick. Like, can we reassess this?
Yeah. I'm open to getting a Mexican for dinner tonight. I'm not quite sure yet what I'm going to do, but I'm open to it.
Potentially, right? You're open to potentially doing that, right? There's a key sentence in here. It's in the second paragraph. This is the fourth paragraph. While it's early in the process, Tennessee has an open mind with the first pick, sources say. All options are on the table, including possibly trading the pick, and the Titans are expected to receive calls from other teams. Then you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the article, the last paragraph. Tennessee could trade. A trade could bring in a bounty of picks, allowing Tennessee to accelerate their build, or they could stick and pick a QB at number one. Okay, great article. The Titans could stick and pick, or they could trade. What are the other options, Justin? Stick and pick or trade? Is there a third option I'm missing here? I mean, great insight on this one, right?
Yeah, I think what was confusing to me is why publish it now? Like, is it because it feels like, you and I, everyone, we've been talking about this for a while, right? Ever since we knew they got the number one pick, right? So what changed? And Ian Rapoport's not dumb, I don't know if it's just like because a national scope, things like this maybe get delayed, you know what I mean, for national coverage. I think what I was questioning that, I'd like to go behind the scenes kind of thing is why now? Why publish this now? There's got to be a reason. That reason's not really laid out in the article, like you said, right? Because it's just like they could do anything is what it says.
I got you on the reason for the timing. The reason is everyone was in New Orleans last week, including Mike Borgonzi. I was in New Orleans as well for Heed the Call with Underdog Fantasy, and I actually got a chance to talk to an insider who spoke directly with Mike Borgonzi, who I'm not going to sell out my source and tell you all who it is or anything, but I know someone who has a pretty good long relationship with Mike Borgonzi, who spoke to him, who he told me that Borgonzi said right now, if they were making the decision today, they would trade the pick. That would be their preferred move, is to be trade the pick, move down to number 3, and try to take Abdul Carter. But he also told this person that that's how they feel right now, and things can change. They haven't met with Cam Ward yet. They don't know. They may fall in love with him. The personality of a quarterback is often just as important as the tape, if not more, assuming you like the tape. So I think the timing of this coming out has to do with all these people being in the same city and having a chance to talk to Borgonzi. It's not like he sent a text to leak this, right? This came out of a face-to-face conversation in New Orleans. So I think the timing has to do with the fact that
you're really just downplaying the fact that was just a Graver bomb. Like that was like
well, I wouldn't have even put this out there if the article didn't exist. Like it's clear that Borgonzi is not trying to keep this a secret or anything. So like I feel like I'm not selling out my source here by sharing this information because the information's out there already. I'm just saying I talked to someone else who wasn't Ian Rapoport who also received information like this that is like, yeah, we'd like to trade the pick, but we haven't made that up our mind yet. And what that tells me, first of all, before we get into realistic trade packages, that tells me they probably are not in love with Shedeur Sanders because they have met with Sanders. They've spent hours with him at the Shrine Bowl. And they came away from that thinking we'd rather trade the pick than draft this kid, right? Now, they haven't met Cam Ward yet, so there's a chance that they fall in love with Cam Ward. But if it were me right now, obviously everyone who listens to this podcast regularly knows what I want the Titans to do. I want them to take Cam Ward with the first overall pick. I'm starting to think that's not going to be the direction it goes. So I'm not going to change my tune on what I think they should do, but I will help you cover what could happen in the most realistic way possible. And right now, it's trending towards the Titans are probably going to want to trade the pick. Now, that can change once they get a chance to meet Cam Ward, and maybe once they get a chance to spend more time with Sanders, that can change. But I also think the further this draft process goes along, the more people are going to come around on the idea that Cam Ward is the clear top quarterback in this class, and Shedeur Sanders, if this was last year, probably wouldn't even be a first-round pick in last year's class, and might not be a first-round pick this year. Like, this could be Will Levis, who was talked about as the number one pick a month or two before the draft and then goes in the second round. It could be Malik Willis, who was mocked to the Lions at like number 3 overall, number 2 overall, the Aiden Hutchinson year, and then ends up going in the third round. Like that, I'm not saying Shedeur Sanders is going to fall that far, but I kind of feel like as the process goes along, Cam Ward's going to separate himself more as the clear number one quarterback. Now, whether or not that means the Titans actually want to draft him is a different conversation. It depends on your view of how the roster should be built, what state it's in right now, and how good Cam Ward can actually be. But let's move forward for this particular episode with the idea that they are going to trade the pick and look at the teams that they could trade the pick to and what they might get in return, right? So I think first up on the list is obviously the New York Giants at pick number 3. And now we talked about on our last podcast the trade the Bears made to go from the number 3 pick to the number 2 pick. And they did not give up a future first-round pick. I looked at all of the trades that have happened since 1967 in NFL history where the number 1 pick was traded. And I will say... the
Oilers move up for Earl Campbell then.
I did. I will also say I don't really think it's relevant talking about any trades that happened not in this century. So let's cut it down, outrageous. To the handful of trades for the number 1 pick that have happened this century. And I just want to, I guess what I wanted to do with this, in addition to coming up with some realistic trade packages, is help Titans fans understand that the realistic chance of getting a future 1 back are not high. You have to move pretty far down the board to get a future 1 back. So far down that you have to question if it's even worth it. The highest pick that I saw in the NFL history for the number 1 pick being traded for that netted a future 1 was from 1 to 9, and that was when the Bears traded with the Panthers and got the Panthers future 1, which ended up being the number 1 pick the next year. Great trade for the Bears. Got them Caleb Williams, got them DJ Moore and a future first-round pick, and the number 9 overall pick that year. I mean, that was a huge win for the Bears. But there are other trades in recent history where we have to go all the way back to 2001, so it's not that recent. But in 2001, the San Diego Chargers gave up the number 1 pick to the Atlanta Falcons. They moved down to number 5, where they selected LaDainian Tomlinson, by the way. Moving down from 1 to 5 netted them, obviously, the 5th overall pick, a 3rd-round pick that season, and a future 2nd-round pick. That's it. They got 3 total picks. One of them was a swap from 1 to 5, a 2nd-round pick that year, and a future 2nd-round pick.
I don't think that would be enough in today's day and age, though. I don't know. I don't see that being the case.
So if that's not enough, what is enough? I mean, we can look at a more recent trade. There's only been 3 this century. So the other trade
San Fran gave up when they came up for Lance to number 3.
So the 49ers that year came up from number 12 to number 3.
Mm.
They gave up, obviously, number 12 for number 3, so a swap of 2021 first-round picks. They gave up a 2022 first, a 2022 third, and a 2023 first. So they did give up 3 first-round picks for 1, moving from 12 to 3. But that was also a year that, if you remember, it was super highly competitive for quarterbacks, especially at the top of the draft, where many people thought that class was going to be very, very good. That was obviously ended up being the Zach Wilson draft, the Justin Fields draft, the Trevor Jones Lawrence draft.
Mac Jones, it's been a terrible class. But I still think that's notable because they knew they were coming up for the 3rd quarterback. They knew they weren't going to get 1 or 2. And they gave up 2 additional firsts. I don't like to include the swap pick because that's a swap. 2 additional firsts. And, I'm not going to sit here and we're going to get into it now. I'm not going to sit here and say the Titans are definitely going to get a future first. But I don't think it's crazy far-fetched because what you just countered with saying, super competitive for quarterbacks. Yada. I mean, this might be pretty competitive for one of those quarterbacks potentially. I'm not ready to say that it won't be, because you got such QB needy teams in the top 10, right? Like Cleveland at 2, Giants at 3. You can go further. Maybe, I don't want the Titans to go that far down, but if the Giants fear the Raiders at 6, for example, or they fear the Jets who are moving on from Aaron Rodgers, just the competition potentially between the Browns and the Giants could create a lot of competition for the pick.
Well, that's the other aspect to it, is that in order for this trade to net a haul that I think Titans fans would actually feel excited to receive, you have to have more than one team willing to come up. And maybe it's a good thing, what I was talking about earlier, if Cam Ward becomes the clear-cut number 1 and Shedeur Sanders slides a bit, or even Jackson Dart overtakes him, but he's still, how highly are we really going to rank Jackson Dart? That if there's only one quarterback, maybe you can create the bidding war that you need to drive the price of this pickup. But that also lends the question, don't the Titans need a quarterback? If all these teams are willing to give up all this capital to come get one, shouldn't the Titans is he that good? Shouldn't the Titans just take him? But whatever, that's not the subject of the conversation here. So I just want to say, if you move back from 1 to 3 with the New York Giants, you're most likely getting a couple picks in this year's draft, maybe a second and a third, a second and a fourth, and a future 2 or 3. The chances that future pick is a 1, because even if you create the bidding war, you need every team in that bidding war to also be willing, or at least one of them to be willing to give up a future first-round pick. And if the Giants are willing to give up a future second, and the Jets are willing to give up 2 future picks, but none of them are a future 1, that doesn't necessarily drive the price up to a future 1. I think in order to get a future 1, you'd probably have to move back to, at a minimum, 7 with the New York Jets. I think if the New Orleans Saints
6
decide,
would be far enough with the Raiders.
You think 6 with the Raiders? That is the big question. Can you get a first-round pick for moving from 1 to 6? There's no history that would set a precedent for what that value would look like. And I know there's the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart, but feels like every GM has their own trade value chart at this point. Nobody's still working off, maybe somebody is, but most GMs aren't still working off a chart that was invented 25, 30 years ago, right? So I do think that moving to 6 could get you there, but most Titans fans don't want to move that far back. You're the draft expert. There's 4 players that Titans fans are saying one of these 4 no matter what, right? Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter. If you move back to 6, you don't get any of those guys, most likely, unless Sanders is still there because of what I was just talking about.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You might get Sanders. I was just thinking that. But, as a big draft guy and someone who wants them to trade down, I want them to trade down to 3, right? Because I don't love what's going to be there at 6. And it doesn't really work out for the Titans that well. You could say they're working from a bare bones situation almost, but I think the 2 best players in the draft, who you didn't just mention, are a D tackle, Mason Graham, which they probably don't need, right? Unless they're planning on trading Jeffrey Simmons. They don't need one. And I would honestly maybe say a cornerback in Will Johnson, which they might need desperately a year from now. It wouldn't shock me if the need at corner is much bigger than we think it is, right? Based on, what happened with Snead and Awuzie this past year. But right now, you're not going to draft a corner, right? I don't think in the first round of this draft. So, yeah, the further, and then, there still might not be a lineman worth it there. The second edge it's kind of questionable in my opinion. So, yeah, if you're going down to 6 or 7, I'm probably not loving the pick that they're making this year. But I am loving the future capital that they're probably getting to do it. So the way I feel about the Giants thing is weird because I sit here and I'm like, if they got a 2026 first, of course, for me, that's a no brainer, right? Now, the flip side of that, if they don't get one, does that mean they get 33 and 65 or whatever the heck it is? It's 33 and 67. Because that, as much as the first is important, I think I'd still do it for 33 and 67, to be honest with you, and then maybe a future third or fourth or whatever it takes. But
34.
I think that's what's interesting to me.
34 and 65, just to
yes.
correct the exact numbers there. I'm looking at the full draft order. Well, that's the question is because I think ultimately what you have to weigh here is if you pass on the chance to draft Cam Ward, it's because you think you're going to be drafting that quarterback next year, most likely. I mean, how many years are you going to go kicking the can down the road with a veteran bridge? So at some point, you got to get your quarterback of the future. And if you just get picks in this year's draft, that may that may allow you to add some pieces that can really build up your roster and set you up to insert a quarterback. I hate this as a philosophy, but whatever. If they're going to do it, that's what they're going to do. Then that could be the case, but then you're relying on next year's pick. I mean, you're relying on your team to be bad enough this year that next year's pick is high enough, or you're in a situation where next year you're giving up all the capital that you just got or future capital to go up and get somebody, which sort of defeats the purpose of trading back this year when you're already at the top of the draft order. So unless you just are going to be in love with the quarterback, we don't have to rehash this debate about the what ifs of next year's quarterback class. If you're interested in that combo, go check out the last episode we published. But I do think it's a big risk. So let's real quick. The teams that are probably in play here are number 3, New York Giants, number 6, Las Vegas Raiders, number 7, New York Jets, and maybe number 9, New Orleans Saints, depending on what happens with Derek Carr. I will say I heard rumblings during Super Bowl week while I was down there that the Saints are planning to stick with Carr. That is their current plan, is to continue on with Derek Carr this next season. So that's before they hire a head coach. So I don't know if that's going to change. I mean, Kellen Moore.
Another Graver bomb. You're on fire.
Hey, being in New Orleans is cool. You get access to a lot of information. But yeah. So I don't know if the Saints are actually going to move on from Derek Carr or not, and that'll play into our free agent quarterbacks episode here.
Yeah, I'll say right now, if I'm just going to predict, the Jets are not going to trade up. It won't be the Jets from number 7. I would be pretty stunned. I mean, there's always a chance, but I'm getting the feeling that GM head coach combo feel like they've got a leash. Like they're going to cut ties with Aaron Rodgers and take on a huge dead cap hit, apparently. Like I think they're going to just take it on the chin this year.
They're going to designate him as a post-June 1st, so we'll see how big the cap hit is. But yes, I agree.
Right,
overall.
Fair. But my point is, I think they're just going to take that rebuild on the chin this year. I don't think they're going to be aggressive this year to come up. I think they're just going to, this is not going to be a great year. Let's kind of find ourselves, set the culture, yada, yada.
Absolutely possible. So if you remove the Jets from consideration, I mean, again, if you move down to 3, the chances that you get a future first-round pick are extremely low. If you move down to 6, the only chance you're getting a first-round pick is if Vegas is trying to outbid New York. If Vegas feels like they need to outbid the Giants, then they might throw that future first-round pick in there. But historical precedent says that from 1 to 5 does not get you that future first-round pick. From 1 to 6, is that a big enough difference that future second turns into a future one?
I think it would, personally. I think it would. Even the Giants, like I get what you're saying, and I'm not saying they would definitely get a first. I'm just not ready to rule it out because I think every situation is so unique. And I think the Giants are so goddamn desperate for a quarterback. Like I've been having this argument with Titans fans for weeks. Even I think a couple of Giants up there I mentioned. It's driving me nuts. They're all telling me, well, why would the Giants? They're no more desperate than the Titans. Yes, they are. In my opinion, I don't see that situation similar at all. I think the Giants are so much more desperate because the GM head coach combo are so lucky to still have their jobs. They've got to go right now. Borgonzi doesn't feel the Joe Shane is waking up going, I can't believe I'm still the GM of this football team. Mike Borgonzi's waking up going, cool, I'm now finally a GM of a football team. It's so different. The Titans get a bridge quarterback this year and win 6 games, and then they're staying the course and believe they see progress. The Giants get a bridge quarterback this year and win 6 games, and they're all filing address changes the day after Week 18 ends. It's nowhere near the same.
And that could be the driving force if the Titans can capitalize on that desperation. And we know Mike Borgonzi was integral in working out some trades that were benefiting Kansas City as they received picks for, assets that apparently were depreciated or depreciating, or getting DeAndre Hopkins
like
for
L'Jarius
peanuts.
Needs depreciating me? No, I'm kidding.
That's exactly what I'm referring to. And we'll see how that works out this year. But yeah, I think the overall point is you got to get a real desperate situation going here. And you have to convince New York that Vegas is trying to come up, or that New York Jets or New Orleans or somebody else is trying to come up. Because if the Giants don't believe that, they could play hardball too. And I know you think they're very desperate, but sitting at number 3, they are probably still in play for Shedeur Sanders. And are they desperate enough to move up 2 picks to ensure that they get him and pay the price of a future first? I think the one thing playing in your favor here is they know they may be gone in 2026. And so they're like, who cares about a 2026 first round pick?
Yeah,
we're not making that pick.
Exactly. Yeah. That too, right? So I guess I shouldn't ask you because you wouldn't do it because you want Cam Ward. But, 33 or whatever you said it was, 34 and 65, I think you said it was.
Yeah,
34 and 65. Like, you're not getting the future capital to give you the wiggle room to maneuver the board in 2026, because that's when you would need a quarterback if you go this route. So that does hurt. But is the roster, are you intrigued by building, like, all of a sudden you'd have number 3, number 34, and 35, right? Because you got your own pick. And then you'd have 2 in the 60s. Sorry, you don't have your own in the 60s. That's incorrect. But you'd have the Giants in the 60s and then your own at 101.
Right, 66
so,
shipped
that's
to Kansas City for L'Jarius Need. That is a lot of capital.
I'm just going to say this really quick. Call me crazy. I think this Giants roster is more ready for that kind of move than people realize it is. I mean, you want to friggin', we're not going to play this game for too long, but the Giants have a better receiver than the Titans have. The Giants have 2 better pass rushers than any pass rusher the Titans have. The Giants have a lot of young talent in their secondary. Now, the Titans, they've got Jarvis Brownlee, they've got Snead, Awuzie, but they just drafted Tyler Nubin and Drew Phillips, who had great years. They had Deontay Banks, first-round pick the year before. Like, I would argue the Giants feel better about their young secondary than the Titans do. And by the way, they've got an offensive tackle that's better than any of the tackles the Titans have too, and Andrew Thomas. And they've got other weapons, young weapons. They got Theo Johnson at tight end, Tyrone Tracy at running back. Like, this Giants roster is ready for an aggressive QB move.
I think that's fair, but whatever. We can talk about where I think the Titans roster stands, because I think it's pretty comparable to where Washington was this time last year. We'll get to that on a future episode. Where you make the right moves in free agency and insert the quarterback, and you could be ready. Like, the Titans have building blocks the way that the Commanders did with McLaurin and Deron Payne and various guys that I could point to on the Commanders offensive line.
Washington changed more of their roster than like anybody in the league.
Anyone in the league. They only retained 39% of their roster from 2023 to 2024. The Titans would have to do something similar. They'd have to go sign a bunch of solid veterans who don't break the bank. Don't go sign the Calvin Ridleys. You sign the mid-level guys like they did. But anyway, that's a conversation for a future podcast. But I think we should wrap this conversation up by saying that, yes, if you did get that kind of package from New York, where you ended up getting 34 and 65, and you probably get a future pick as well, whether it's a 2 or a 3 next year, and you're probably giving up, when the Titans traded the number 1 pick to the Rams in 2016, they gave up a 1, a 4, and a 6 to get back a 1, 2 2s, a 3, and a future 1. Right, so the Titans may have to give up some capital too in this draft, some late capital. It's like you're almost like swapping this year's 5th round pick for a 2nd round pick or whatever. Do the Titans even have their own 5th round pick?
They do.
They do. Okay, they got it, or they got one from Kansas City, and they have their own 5th round pick. So there you go. But yes, so you may be giving up that in order to get back the 3. But if you get a future 2 or 3, you're talking about how like that's not a future 1. That's not enough capital to go up and get your quarterback. Well, it could be. It could be if you have 2 2s next year,
Exactly.
and you could package those 2 2s with a 1 to move up and get your quarterback. So I do think there is a world where that does help the team. And ultimately, like, after watching last night's Super Bowl, there's a lot of people on Twitter who are like, oh, wow, the Titans should draft Abdul Carter. Look at how Philly's defensive line just wrecked Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. And, like, I get that mindset, but also the Eagles have the best roster in football by a lot. And if you put there's 15 quarterbacks you could put on the field behind that line and win an NFL championship. And I guess that's the argument for not taking Cam Ward, is that if you build up the roster well enough, you don't need an elite quarterback to come in there. But the Titans don't have an elite roster. And if they want to be really competitive, I still think they need to go get the quarterback. But whatever. This is a conversation about trading the number 1 pick. So I think let's finalize this by saying, what is a realistic package? A realistic package, if you move to 3, if you move to 6, I don't think they're that different. I think you're talking about a second and a third this year and a future second or third. Maybe a future first, maybe. But I still think, based on the history of this kind of trade, if you're staying in the top 8, I think it's unlikely you get a future first. But those are my final thoughts. Your final thoughts, and then we will hit I'll drink to that and sign off for this episode.
I disagree with the fine. I think if they move any further than 3, if they go to 6 or 7, I think they definitely get a future first. If they go to 3, I get what you're saying. It's certainly not a sure thing. I think there's a chance because of the QB tax and the desperation and the potential competition from other teams. But I agree with you. It's probably likelier if you're going third that you get basically a bunch of 2s and maybe a bunch of 3s.
Well, there you go. I mean, we have a slight disagreement here, and the only way to know who's right is to see what happens. Let's hit I'll drink to that, and we'll get out of here. I'll drink to that, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville. And today I'm drinking to the fact that, as of today, the NFL's waiver period for the 2025 league year has begun. From this date until week 3 of the regular season, the waiver order will mirror the draft order, which means the Titans will have top priority on all waived players for the next 7 months, whether or not they trade the number 1 pick. They trade the pick, they're not trade. The waiver order doesn't come with it. So I don't know how much of an influence this will have on the Titans' ability to build their roster, but any player that gets cut between now, or waived, I guess, there's a difference between vested veterans being cut and a player being waived. But any player who gets waived, who is subject to waivers between now and week 3, if the Titans want him, the Titans get him.
Yeah, the Kansas City should cut Mahomes after that performance in the Super Bowl the other night. That was pitiful. Maybe Titans.
Or they should trade him. Or they should trade him in the middle of the night and call him fat on the way out the door. You know what I mean?
I'll drink to that.
My guy, Luka, makes his NBA debut Monday night for the Lakers. All right. So anyway, yes, I'll drink to that. That's what we're drinking to. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store serving the community since 1985. Their knowledgeable staff is proud to help you with large parties, themed events, or finding something unique for a special occasion. From birthday parties to milestone celebrations to everyday moments, Sinkers can help with the right drink for every occasion. And if you head to the sinkersbeverages.com website or check the link in this podcast description, you can join the In-Crowd. In-Crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more. Plus, Sinkers Beverages is on Uber Eats. All right, Justin, later this week, we're ranking free agent quarterback options for the Titans, moving forward with this idea that they may not be drafting Cam Ward, which would break my heart, especially if he goes off and has an amazing career for someone else. Even if he goes off and stinks it up for someone else, I'm still going to be sad that we never got to root for him, which maybe that's stupid, but whatever. Any final thoughts, Justin, before we sign off?
No, that's going to be a good one. I'm excited about that.
Alrighty, well then, make sure you are subscribed to the Music City Audible channel, turn on alerts for this channel, give this video a thumbs up, like, and drop a comment below. What do you think a realistic trade package is? After hearing our thoughts, who do you agree with? Because it's been fun, the last couple episodes to have like a sort of a Melo's take versus Graver's take and see where people in the comments come down. It's pretty split. I like it. This is a good discourse. This is This is going to be a good off-season discourse for the next 2.5 months. So let's keep it up by leaving a comment below. I appreciate all of you. We'll be back later this week. Until then, y'all stay safe out there and
tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.